Hello, everyone. My guest today is a digital leader from a multi-billion-dollar manufacturer of hardware and intelligent devices. We know the brand popularly as Toshiba. Allen Wuescher is the VP and CIO at Toshiba International Corporation. We cover topics from cybersecurity to DEI initiatives. Allen, welcome to the Get in the Mode podcast.
Thanks, David. Really great to be here.
Great. Alan, for the benefit of our listeners, could you please give us a little bit about your background and what's your roles and what are your roles and responsibilities at Toshiba as the CIO?
Yeah, thanks, David. So good to be here. I am the Chief Information Officer for the Industrials Division of Toshiba, located in Houston, Texas. So we have some other sister companies. What we are responsible for is manufacturing or selling industrial products into the U.S. Marketplace. So that's the current role I've got, is to support all the information technology function, assist and lead certain digital efforts, and certainly communicate with all the business units to make sure that their IT needs are met, and just align IT as best as what we can with the business to continue down the path of being successful at Toshiba.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the changing needs of cybersecurity, right, with the new market conditions. You've been a big proponent of cybersecurity. Can you tell us what are some of the new cybersecurity things that you're seeing as the CIO?
Yeah. So David, I'll preface this by saying my statements and observations are my own and not necessarily on behalf of Toshiba America or International Corporation. But what I do know is that cybersecurity is certainly most likely the hottest topic across the board right now when it comes to boards and business units are talking about. With the most ransomware attacks, it's top of mind everywhere. And so I think, if you look across the spectrum of where there's a dilemma in hiring people, certainly it's reflective of that we are short candidates in the cybersecurity market. And that's broadly. I mean, this is a global issue. We just don't have enough folks to really fill spots that have the right acumen for filling those types of roles just yet. So I mean, we're trying to catch up, but it is, in my opinion, it's pinnacle. I think even in our personal lives, we're becoming more aware of the importance of our personal security as it relates to cybersecurity. Fact of the matter is, you're very likely to be, your security is very likely to be compromised from a logical perspective, less so than a physical perspective. These are just changes that have happened over the course of the last 30, say 50 years. And I think people are really trying to catch up. So if you ask me what the number one thing we have to do, not just as a company but as a society, is to really educate everyone on how to become more secure in their logical life, if you will.
So, on is that what is the threat, the new sort of threats that we are seeing in cybersecurity? Obviously everybody's working remote. I'm curious, with Toshiba and other leadership positions that you've had in the past. What are there other is the landscape changing? What are some changes you're seeing in terms of the threats?
Yeah, so I think the landscape's changing because there's no doubt. So when I got out of school, actually when I was teaching as part of the PhD program at LSU, most of the things I would teach were very rudimentary in terms of Word, Excel, PowerPoint. This is back in the '90s, and now everybody knows how to use a computer, right? I think that we are in a unique situation right now because clearly because of the pandemic, and the pandemic is a global issue, and really what's happened is people are at home, and when people are at home, I mean, we've seen spikes in every platform that that's been issued during this period, right? And so you have higher intellect in the space of technology now than you've ever had before. And let's face it, when you're bored and you're at home and you're in possibly a foreign land, and your government is encouraging you to potentially hack somebody and might offer you some rewards for being successful in that nature. I mean, we are in the pinnacle of being attacked, and people have been educated on how to attack more than any time in the history of of what we've experienced. And so yeah, I don't think this issue goes away. The other piece of it, obviously, is just automation. You've got bots out there that can take advantage and get very sophisticated with 24/7 hacking without anyone really doing much. And then if you think through, I mean, it's kind of a leap of faith here, but more and more technology, we talk to it. It's as simple as that. So hacking becomes easier that way as well. Just think of it in the nature of hackers, pretty sophisticated keys on the keyboard kind of thing, or social engineering. And now, quite frankly, people could hack you verbally over a device, and that's not been available for the last 5 years. So I mean, it's just becoming more pervasive, and it's becoming much easier for people to try to do.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the bots too. Like as digital gets sophisticated, I think even the hacking and the spyware and the malware part gets equally sophisticated with better capabilities and things like that. So they can, even the bots are kind of working hard to attack, right? So that's a great point. As CIOs and CISOs, right? What are I mean, is you talked a little bit about the education side of it, right? What are if you were to kind of talk about focus areas on how to address these threats, what would those be? Like, what are the different channels you would want to address this at what level?
Yeah, I think from a technology perspective, obviously we have rolled out more and more products that protect us at the edge, and I think that's critically important. You need to stop an attack as soon as it's detected. It's a 24/7 game. It's interesting that a lot of the monitoring still today, and third parties offer something that's other than 24/7, which I don't quite understand, because if your computer's plugged in, it doesn't matter whether you're awake or not, you can be attacked at that point in time. And so, I think we've always been historically very good about protecting the central nervous system of our companies, but now as we're rolling things out and more compute powers at the edge, there's more out there. I think, in terms of educating the people internally, it's also getting more sophisticated around their knowledge of what an attack looks like. So we've become much more sophisticated with our internal phishing campaigns, and that's company wide. If you want to get more, targeted by nature, like if you're looking at your senior leadership teams and things of that nature, boards as well. I mean, you do have to go through. It's no different than historically what you would do for a business continuity plan. They don't work if you don't test them. You can put it all on paper, but if you don't go through a scenario when it actually happens, people still don't know, what they need to do, because those scenarios have to include certain that kind of put you in this unexpected. Oh, well, I didn't see that coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those scenarios have to be rolled out as well. So if the companies are attacked in any way, and you do have a compromise of ransomware or something, other operations coming down, intellectual property leaving the building, those types of scenarios have to be pretty well acted. So that way, people know how they're going to deal with that stress, and already have a predetermined way that they've practiced in terms of how they need to act, who they need to communicate with, and so that's relatively new. The other big space right now that is complicated, obviously, is cybersecurity insurance as well. So
Mhm.
protecting board members, protecting the company, protecting whomever that needs to be protected by putting the right plan in place, such that if you do have a compromise, you do have coverage. Because more times than not, there are a lot of stipulations in the documents, as any insurance document would be, that if you don't read it in detail, may not cover you. So those types of things really need a lot of attention.
Yeah. And, it's interesting that you mentioned business continuity too. Like, it's almost like, I mean, yes, it's cost of doing business. Toshiba is fair, obviously have a budget for it. How do you, what would be your advice to a CIO who's trying to secure a budget for cybersecurity threats? What's the best way for them to communicate to the board, do you think?
Yeah, I think we're at a point where there's enough examples, and it's um, I think what boards need to understand is, what we see in the marketplace and what is out there is just a fraction of really what's occurring. And what
Mm.
I mean by that is the things that go public. There's really there was no way for that particular incident to be sheltered, because inevitably people, companies aren't very liberal about talking about compromises that they have, and so we're just seeing a fraction of that. So my best advice is to um, use representative examples, and there are examples, and it's
Yeah.
always good to use an example that is very comparable you do as an organization, because it can happen to you, and it needs to be expressed to boards that there's no 100% protection from these types of attacks. The reality is, if a nation state or a very sophisticated operator wants to get to you, inevitably, if they are targeting you, they will get there, right?
Yeah.
And you'll have defenses to capture them, but you are getting targeted.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. And so I think I would start with representative examples. My overall arching thing is, let's get the plans in place before something happens, right?
Yeah.
Because what you don't want to be in the situation of, and there are representative examples of this, where a company did not sufficiently invest and they were compromised, and then the amount of money they had to put in on the back end for ridding themselves of the compromise and then putting things in place was exorbitantly more than if they had made just the right investments in the get-go, right? And so that's a story that's told over and over again, and there are so many examples of that. I mean, boards should understand that.
Yeah.
So that that's my best recommendation in terms of
Okay.
talk to a board.
Awesome. Well, you've been a big proponent and you've been passionately speaking about blockchain as well. So, can you break down some of the roles that blockchain has in the security world?
Yeah, so to pivot a bit, then I think what we're definitely starting to understand is, again, as businesses and society, is that security is a mechanism for really generating revenue at this point. And why I say that, um, you know, it's a different scenario between a an individual product that consumers are buying being compromised versus an industrial system, for instance, right? And
Mm.
so the industrial space has been moving a bit more cautiously into this space, and I think blockchain has a big part to play. Rightly, wrongly, my opinion is, if blockchain weren't secure, I don't think the Bitcoin would be worth anything. Uh,
Right.
and I think the fact that these crypto assets, have taken off, and they will ebb and flow. If ever compromised, you know, then they would cease to exist. It's just the fact, So blockchain, in my mind, is the newest technology that really needs to be understood. There's a lot of growth there. It's so new, and I think the dilemma right now is obviously the amount of energy it takes to run it, the amount of time it takes to transact. But clearly, the end game is is having secure transactions at a cost that is a fraction of what you can do today in terms of having a transaction be made, right? And so the distributed network does not work if not secure. And I think that's the piece that really goes a bit misunderstood. I mean, we've always had centralization because securing a central asset is a lot easier historically, than securing something that is diverse by nature. And so I think blockchain has solved that, and I think it is the game changer. And those companies, in the next decade that can encompass selling whatever it is that they sell and using blockchain in those transactions will win. I think that they'll be able to drive a cost to the consumer that is more advantageous and more applicable to the price of the asset than what currently any of their competitors would be.
So your what I understand is just by the very nature of security that blockchain has, and there's intrinsic value in that, and that actually translates to what? Can you break down what does that translate to, perhaps an organization or an individual?
Yeah, well, let's put it in terms of a product because we understand that. So
Sure.
we sell products all the time. Toshiba's selling products all the time. Most companies are selling products, and and again, because consumers are becoming more uh, educated on the value behind the security, uh, you buy something that's more secure.
Secure.
And I think the where let's say you have a an asset that historically you were interested in speed, right? You wanted it to be fast. Well, if it's fast and not secure, in today's market, you're less likely to go with that product than you would if it was just a little slower and more secure, right? It's kind of we've made that change. If you look in the consumer space, I mean, if you look at where we're heading with automotive, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
gets really scary when they start saying that if you're in a certain type of vehicle, that if it's hacked, then maybe the brakes don't work, right? Or then we kind of leapfrog into if if it's a self-driving vehicle and you want to go to point A to point B, right? Cybersecurity is pinnacle in making sure that that happens, and that you don't go off course because someone's hacking that car. So,
Mhm.
um, and then if you look at the amount of transactions, so if we get into kind of that self-driving vehicle scenario
Mhm.
where you go up to a car, it's a self-driving vehicle, it's on the side of the road, but when you go into that transaction, you have a lot of transactions that need to be made in terms of the insurance that has to be purchased for the amount of space that you're driving from point A to point B, unlocking the vehicle, putting the vehicle back, all of those types of things. There's just so many transactions to be thought through if that's where we're heading in transit society or in transportation. And
Yeah.
again, the security is pinnacle for all those things happening. The transactions that need to take place and go to the different third parties that need to get paid, all of those things really to reside on a platform that, or has to reside on a platform that is secure by nature and that people trust. And so that just gets back to blockchain is a pretty good scenario for playing a part of what the future looks like, and I think people are going to want that in order for them to
Mhm.
buy it.
Yeah.
And again, I think people will wait, and they're not going to invest anymore into things that may not be pure as what they can get. So
Yeah, definitely. You're talking about security as a value driver. I mean, I can see not just in, I mean, automotive, obviously, we know where it's kind of headed with the self-driving cars and other things that are capable of that even at as we speak. And even potentially financial products and, even credit cards and institutions, right? That will have certain value in terms of having this intrinsic nature of blockchain frameworks security. Um, Slightly changing from security and future of security, those topics, to more the people side of things. um, you know let's talk a little bit about DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. um, Talk to us about some of the initiatives that you like to lead, you've led, as a champion of diversity.
Yeah, so the beauty of the United States in general is the diversity of this country, and I think sometimes we forget how good we have it in this country. Um, but when you're going to market and you have any asset, device, service, whatever it might be that you want to sell, and I mean we're now in a global marketplace, more than we ever have been, and it's only going to head in that direction. So, foreseeably, you look at these platforms that are built out that serve not just a single country or community. It serves basically, and so as you get people in the room to kind of discover how that platform or whatever is reacting very well in a specific space or in your community or in your country, you want to have those conversations about, well, how is that going to work in a different country? You can't have those conversations unless there's diversity in those conversations. And so I think it's pinnacle to the success of any company specifically that wants to have, be multicultural by nature and sell its products or services into another market, that succeed if it does not have a diverse team associated with what it's trying to do. And we have we're in this time right now where getting integration and getting diversity into our teams is actually a bit easier than it's been in the past, because we have these technologies now in terms of Zoom, so it's much easier to broaden your scope. And I think companies need to start thinking that way. It's hard that we're not in person, but really this new technology has opened up some opportunities for companies to really succeed on the diversity path that hasn't been available before. And so I'm really enthusiastic about, there's just going to be tremendous growth associated with companies that recognize how much more successful they're going to have from a diverse thinking portfolio. Because, what we can't do is we can't have teams leading marketing efforts that, that aren't thinking, oh, well, when we go to market in this particular area, how will they think about our product? How will they think about what we're trying to sell from a service? Because we can put together what we think is best, but then when you start going to other markets, it may just be not really respected as well, because it hasn't just been thought out for them. So that's I think that's the nature, and I think, again, I get back to in terms of diversity of thinking. I think the U.S. Being the melting pot that it is, I think that's why you see a lot of the successful enterprises that go global really come from the United States, is because we have a good foundation, and I think we need to continue to build on the positive nature of what we've built here. Can it be better? Absolutely. Comparable to a lot of other places, we're way ahead of the game, and I think we need to take credit for that.
Yeah. What are some recommendations you have, especially in that area, in the DEI space, to other CIOs out there, if they want to practice that and bring that into their organization?
Um, so, yeah, I think definitely has to be communicated. And like I said before, we're on the technology side, so we can see kind of the value outside of, let's say, the normal, let's say, technical meetings that we have with our internal teams. And so to think outside the box is a little difficult to do when your business leaders are just trying to lead their business day by day and get done what they need to be done. It's like we are absorbing this technology that's been taken in just recently so that we can communicate within our spaces. What I think is lost upon people is how much this opens up to you. And David, I'll tell you, even you and I talking today, this wouldn't have happened, I think, even 18 months ago, because it's possible we wouldn't have even met, and so
Yeah.
I I think there's so much that we can do as organizations, and I think business leaders have to understand that this new technology that we've developed, it's been there, but in terms of its evolvement over the past 12 months has just been astronomically overwhelming. And just think through this, because the technology is on the fly. We're at a point where if you want to have these conversations and you want to have it in a different country, the technology can even translate it for you, right? So as you're talking to someone in another country, if they don't even understand your language, they can talk their language and it can come through as your language over your PC, right? So these are the types of things that need to be explained to businesses so they understand how they use the technology to get more diverse. It's a lot easier than it's ever been.
Well, Alan, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, and thank you for coming on our Get in the Mode podcast today.